Aquaba, welcome. Join me, Adwoa, your Black genealogist, as I guide you through my personalized Nyansapow Hematite book, a journey through DNA, heritage, and health. The music you're hearing, it's special to me. It's from a high life record produced by my father, Thaddeus Olsen, and his friend Sam Mensa, and performed by my mother, Ikwa Mensa, who was accompanying Jewel Aka in the 1980s. It's a type of connection to the links I'm exploring through this process. Here you see two photos: my mom's family portrait with her parents and siblings and her brother-in-law, and then underneath you see my father's family portrait where his family is gathered after his late infant sister was christened. These photos remind me of just a few of many of the lives and stories that can make up our lineage. And through this book, I'd like to explore with you what DNA can reveal about some of these folks, their stories, and my lineage. I'll introduce elements of my family story, the Mensa and Olsen families, through our DNA results, maternal and paternal. Along the way, you'll see how working with multiple relatives impacts what and how much we can discover. I was grateful to have my two brothers and my parents join me after I started with my first DNA test with AncestryDNA in 2017, about a year after the birth of my first child. First, we'll dive into my ethnicity estimates. I've tested with AncestryDNA, Living DNA, MyHeritage, and FamilyTreeDNA. I've also transferred my results to GenMatch. What I often do is encourage people to test with a company like AncestryDNA, since you can't transfer your results to them, but you can upload your ancestry results to all of the other companies that are listed on this page. Each company interprets your DNA a bit differently or represents your regional ethnicity estimates differently. I think it's helpful to compare one estimate to the others to create a bit of maybe like a fuller picture of your heritage. For instance, Living DNA doesn't show any of my European ancestry, but it does highlight my Akan ethnicity, which is the people that my parents and their parents and their parents associated as being their community. So it doesn't hurt to have more data points. In my Nyansapow book, hyperlinks connect me directly to the most up-to-date results from each platform. I simply log into each of my accounts, and if I'm logged in before I delve into this book, when I click on the links, it takes me directly into Ancestry, Living DNA, whatever companies I have accounts with. So here you'll see an example of the start of a Nyansapow Hematite Plus tier booklet. This provides a window into my deep ancestry and some additional tools to better understand and make decisions about my health. L2A and down here under the recording symbol is my maternal uncle's paternal haplogroup. So haplogroups trace ancient family lines. Y DNA is passed from father to son, while mitochondrial DNA or mtDNA comes from mothers to both her sons and her daughters, but it's only passed on through female children. Every haplogroup started in Africa over thousands of years ago, and DNA changes contribute to new branches in this giant human family tree spreading across the world. My mom and her brother were among the first in my family to take mtDNA tests and Y-DNA tests. And these have helped me learn more about my mother's maternal family and her paternal family. The Hematite Plus tier also includes a health report from Pure Insights. exploring a new field called nutrigenomics, the science of how our genes can interact with nutrition and lifestyle choices. By understanding, or at least trying to understand, the differences in my genes, I can make personalized choices about my diet, my lifestyle, to make efforts towards improving my health outcomes. My Nyansapow book brings all of these elements together, and I can even use this little red heart. It's an icon that I can click on to join the spanDNA family's Garmin support group, where family members encourage one another on their health and wellness journeys, linked to their Garmin devices. While spanDNA doesn't give medical or health advice, we do offer tools and insights that you can discuss with your healthcare provider, your trainer, to make some informed decisions about your health and your well being. Wherever you see an orange symbol that says report with the blue arrow, that can take you to either the health report if it's in the health section, or it can take you to an updated haplogroup report if it's on the haplogroup side of the page. And the little icon with the video takes you to educational videos that are a bit more digestible than some of the information in the report provided by Pure Insights. So let's look at my autosomal DNA results. That's the DNA that comes from both my parents, starting with AncestryDNA. AncestryDNA helps me see which regions I inherited from both of my parents. With over 2,000 matches, it's where I've found the most connections to distant family members, close family members, what I call transatlantic cousins, and these other cousins I may never have met before this process. 23andMe adds another perspective, showing where my DNA connects to relatives around the world. For instance, if I click on that globe under my number of matches, it will link me to a map of the world, and where matches of mine who have decided to share their location, I can see where in the world my DNA matches from 23andMe are located. And I do have fewer matches here, but I do get some different perspectives, which I would like to compare with my ancestry ones. MyHeritage gives yet another point of view, with these ethnicity or regional maps and cousin connections. You can see that I have just 157 matches here, but MyHeritage gives a pretty interesting, engaging video with a summary of my results. These numbers might be smaller, but I still think it's meaningful. If you decide to take a test with MyHeritage instead of doing a transfer, you can also get insights into your xDNA. Living DNA stands out to me because it included a Khan with my ethnicity results. This is a significant detail for me as a Ghanaian because my parents identify as being a Khan, as did their parents and their parents. While I only have 26 matches on Living DNA, its regional specificity makes it a valuable addition to my exploration of my genetic genealogy. It is the only platform that did not include any of my European DNA, though. FamilyTreeDNA, here is my autosomal map, and I had 175 matches as of the end of December 2024. But FamilyTreeDNA offers the most variety with autosomal testing, which includes xDNA results, and their mtDNA testing, so your mother's line into the past, and Y-DNA testing. If you're a genetic male, you need to have a Y chromosome for that. And they also offer different levels of Y-DNA testing depending on your budget, or maybe you want to gradually test to see what you find at a lower level before you invest in a more in-depth Y-DNA test. So these are my autosomal results. But here you can see both my mitochondrial results from my own test, my mother's test, and my father's test. So my father's mitochondrial DNA is connected to my father's mother, and my mitochondrial DNA is connected to my mother's mother and going into that line. With our savings using Nyansapow, we were able to use some of that money towards paying for a mitochondrial test. So this traces our Akan line and then even beyond that into, thousands of years back. And on my mother's side, this is likely to trace the iguana number one royal family of Salt Pond because Akans are society that is linked, you belong to your maternal family. And so my mother's maternal family is the iguana number one royal family of Salt Pond. So I am excited to kind of see what I discover as more members of that family are able to engage in mitochondrial testing. And so it's also cool because FamilyTreeDNA provides some explanation, some brief descriptions of each haplogroup. And so the L2 haplogroup is the one to which both of my parents belong, but my mother's is L2A1A1, that's her subclade, and my father's is L21AE. And both of these are part of the L2A, or the L2 group, which is found in Africa. So, why DNA? Thanks to my father and my maternal uncle. Here is the map representing my mother and her brother's paternal line. My mother's paternal line is the Mensa line, and my uncle took a big Y test. You can see kind of the spread of the journey from the beginning of like the documentation of like the first like group of men throughout Africa for this E haplogroup. Unfortunately, there remains a gap in the data from my mother's African paternal haplogroup, which to me highlights the underrepresentation of African peoples in genetic research. A challenge I hope to see addressed sooner rather than later. FamilyTreeDNA's tools allow me to see migration patterns and explore haplogroup animations as well. So this one here, this is my father's Y-DNA map. And even though all of the haplogroups originated in Africa, you can see that my father, who's Ghanaian, that his haplogroup is a European one. And it's described as having some frequency across Central Asia, South Asia, and Europe. He has many more Y-DNA matches than my uncle, whose haplogroup is an African one. But as both of them get higher into the big Y matches, neither of them have any big Y matches. So we'll see what happens over time. This next slide, though, is pretty interesting because it shows kind of the migration of the haplogroup starting in Africa and making its way through Europe. It's animated, and I think it's really interesting to see this. I did think it was a little like, I don't know. It was a little disappointing that I could only see it for my father and not for my uncle. My uncle's African haplogroup just doesn't have enough people in it, and so there was no migration map for him. But this is the one that I could see for my father, and it's interesting to see even like the moving of the ice over the centuries and how people moved as the planet was shifting and changing. So it's pretty interesting because it shows kind of the migration of the haplogroup starting in Africa and making its way through Europe. It's animated, and I think it's really interesting to see this. I did think it was a little like, I don't know. It was a little disappointing that I could only see it for my father and not for my uncle. My uncle's African haplogroup It just doesn't have enough people in it. And so there was no migrating. These genetic family trees illustrate DNA connections across my maternal and my paternal lines. I used my brother as the root person in these trees just because I don't have Y-DNA. So this genetic ancestors tree, that one is my autosomal DNA tree showing all the ancestors we can trace through testing and traditional research. On the right at the top is the mtDNA tree highlighting my maternal line, the Akan part of our line as far as we can tell right now. And then you can see at the bottom left the Y-DNA. Sorry, actually on the bottom right, the Y-DNA tree for my father's line. And then on the bottom left, you see the X-DNA tree broadening the picture, showing how DNA is inherited from both parents, but the X is that chromosome that comes from either a woman or one of the chromosomes from a male. Each tree helps to kind of build out the picture a bit more clearly. DNA testing can get expensive, but with some planning, some careful planning, you can make it a bit more affordable. You can look at doing upgrades from DNA transfers instead of, purchasing kits outright. I do want to share, though, that as a first generation North American born to Ghanaian parents, I've inherited centuries of African ancestry. Yet when you look at these genetic family trees, you see these gray boxes labeled unknown, representing 5 generations of my maternal ancestors whose names and stories remain undocumented. Contrast that with my European Alzheimer's line, where really just about 1 to 2% of my DNA, where I have documentation, shows that I'm European as, an ethnically Ghanaian woman. But I'm able to trace a lot more of my European ancestry than I can of my Ghanaian ancestry. And a lot of that I did through traditional genealogy research and documents, but the DNA testing verified a lot of things I had learned about 25 years ago. So this actually isn't extensive in terms of my paternal line. It's just what I could fit here. But it is in stark contrast to what I can document of the Ghanaian and West African women in my maternal side. Over the past 7 years, I've been working pretty tirelessly to gather DNA results from what is now 25 of my Ghanaian relatives and counting. That's 7 years. And I don't think it's that Africans or people in the African diaspora don't want to connect with their diaspora cousins, but these tools and resources can frankly be out of reach for many people. I can't expect all DNA companies to be as generous as MyHeritage has been, where they donated a number of kits for us to take to Ghana and test folks in Ghana to find more connections to be able to learn more about that population. And it would be really interesting to see what it would look like if DNA companies partnered with more communities to provide kits to really cover more of the African continent, where we know scientifically there is more genetic diversity within that continent than the combination of all other continents in the world, all of them combined. So that's just one way of looking at the trees. But let's make it a bit more personal. These 4 photos just scratch at the surface of the connections built through my Nyansapow journey. At the top left, these are some of my maternal ancestors from Salt Pond, Ghana, Asintuta, Ghana, and a lineage which is rooted in Akan traditions. And then at the top right, you see a family portrait of my paternal grandfather's family in Elmina, Ghana. My late grandfather and his living youngest sister appear in that photo. And his youngest sister was wonderful enough to take a DNA test to help us to learn about the connections to that side of the family. At the bottom left, you see a picture of me meeting with our transatlantic cousins, Kim and Cynthia, and my mother and my children. And we're also connected to our cousin Vicky in the UK. She's not pictured, but she's one of the first cousins I discovered through Ancestry that I didn't know personally. And it's through her DNA test that she discovered she had any African heritage. She did not grow up knowing that she had any African heritage. And then at the bottom right, there is a moment of connection with some of my paternal transatlantic cousins, including their matriarch, Leonora Calvin, with her children and her son-in-law, and their family connection, some of which is in Texas in the US, connects to my family line in Elmina, Ghana. Thank you so much for joining me on my personal exploration of this Nyansapow Hematite Plus journey. Our DNA can hold the power to uncover a lot about our roots and connections, and I didn't even delve into like the different branches of my family tree. But you can subscribe to this channel for more updates, stories, suggestions, deals. You can follow me on LinkedIn, spanDNA Families, or just Adwoa, my name. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. All of those links are in my profile. And let's learn together about DNA, diaspora, and discovery. You can always go to spanDNA.com and sign up for our mailing list. You can also, if you're one of our transatlantic cousins, if you're on any of these DNA platforms, you can register for the 2025 spanDNA Families Transatlantic Genealogy Summit. And together we can collaborate to ensure that the voices of African ancestry are brought to life, that the stories are heard, that they're documented, and that the legacies of our ancestors can be honored. It's wonderful to tap into our shared history. And who knows, I could be the cousin you just haven't met yet. We'll meet again.